And I'd given myself 12 months runway
Yeah.
for this business based on us going halves. But then obviously he'd then got a job. So I only had 6 months to make it work.
Got it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Recruiting Alchemy with me, Andy Simpson. Today I'm joined by Chris Moylan, CEO of TechLink Partners, a recruitment company working across Europe and the US in a number of verticals in the technology space. I'm really excited to hear your story, Chris. It sounds like it's been a colourful tale.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to find out all about it. So thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for having me.
Mate, it's great.
Thanks for having me on.
First of all, mate, I have to comment on the suit. Absolutely love it. Do you know what? It's a dying art being well dressed in our game.
Yeah.
I feel you're putting me to shame today. But we'll talk about that in a minute. I look forward to hearing a bit more about it. We start every episode on Recruiting Alchemy with the same format, which is what we describe as the two beginnings. The first one is a bit about you and your background, and then the second beginning is about how you founded your business. Lots of our listeners are often high-performing recruitment consultants, and maybe one day they might want to start their own company. And so they listen to this show to get inspiration, ideas, thoughts, around how other people do it. What's that first step? But we'll come to that in just a moment. But I think to get us started, I'd love to hear the genesis story of Chris Moylan. Where did it all begin?
It's a good question. I think I hear a lot of people ask this question, and a lot of people say I fell into it. I just fell into recruitment, but
Take me back a bit further. You're from Irish stock, are you? Is that right?
Yeah.
So first generation to the UK or second?
Second.
So your parents came here?
Yeah. My dad and mum migrated to the UK.
What brought them to the UK?
I think work opportunities for my dad, yeah.
And where did they set up home?
South East London.
Okay. Whereabouts?
South East London. And originally Notting Hill.
Yeah.
Then they lived in Epsom for a little while. But then when I was born, they moved to Beckenham.
Got it. Okay. And that's where the Moylan years were, the early Moylan years, the glory years happened, was it?
The heyday.
The heyday, mate. A heyday. So born and raised in South East London, school, college, all that in Beckenham, that kind of neck of the woods?
So school, I went to a local primary school.
Yeah.
Secondary school, again, it was reasonably close.
Yeah.
And then I went to college. So being from Irish background, originally I worked in construction.
Right,
long before I'd done sales.
Yeah.
So I worked for my dad from the age of, I don't know, probably even 10. It sounds crazy, just going in the van, doing things on the weekend. So encouraged to get a trade. So I went to college. I mean, I did well at school academically, but I never really done too well with authority and things like that. I think
a rebel.
Yeah. I probably just messing around, that type of stuff. So I left school early.
Right.
I didn't finish school.
Okay.
And I just went straight to work.
Got it.
So I left school in the second year.
Right.
Just silly stuff. Misbehaving and that. Got asked to leave.
Do you regret that? If you know what I mean? If you had your time again, would you think would you say to a younger Chris Moylan, straighten up, sort your life out, or do you think it was the making of you?
I think both. I think there's a lot of things that I'd done when I was younger that I wouldn't do now.
Yeah.
But equally, I think everything happens for a reason. One thing leads you to somewhere else, which leads you to somewhere else. So, left school early, started learning qualifying to be a plumber.
Yeah.
Just because, the Irish thing, get a trade, serve you for life. Qualified as a plumber. And then I struggled to get, the long story short, but I was trying to become a gas engineer.
Right.
And there was a caveat whereby you needed to work with a gas engineer, but the gas engineers wouldn't let you work with them because you didn't have any experience.
So there's a sort of
running around
trapped.
in a circle.
Yeah.
And then in the end, that's when I left working on the building sites and I went into sales.
Right. So did you end up in sales because you'd always want, some people say, you've always got the gift of the gab. Was that you, or was sales a backup? Was it a mechanism to something better? At that point in your life, what were you thinking? Were you like, this is a bit of me, this is? Or was it like, I'll give it a go and see how it goes?
No, so the story was, myself and my friend at the time, both qualifying as plumbers.
Yeah.
We were both still, you could say like slightly irresponsible, just going out, trying to earn money.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And then he saw a job advertisement and he applied for it, and he didn't like doing things on his own. So he said to me, send me your CV. And he applied as well. So I was still on the building site.
Right.
And the transition is that we got a job in Croydon at the time, selling insurance for boilers.
Right.
Which was, looking back on it, it was like super, super dodgy thing to be doing. But we basically got the job just because we had qualified as plumbers.
Right.
And I think there was they thought we're going to know about boilers, which we didn't. And then worked there. And then that was the making of the sales. That was where I learned how to sell. And
were you was it on the phone or door to door?
On the phone.
On the phone.
All day,
Yeah.
All day long.
Yeah.
Just calling people. And that was where it really got drilled into me from, it was an interesting place to work, but they were big on mindset. We used to have to watch motivational videos every Monday.
Really? Old school.
Yeah, wasn't allowed our chair if we didn't do a deal.
Right.
They were brutal with us, ruthless, taught us how to speak correctly. If you weren't speaking correctly, they were
on you.
Yeah. And you wouldn't get away with that now. But that was the grounding, and I was there for a good few years.
Were you I would imagine there's a high turnover of staff, right?
Yeah. Loads.
In those kind of environments. Why did you stick it out and others didn't?
I think because I was doing deals.
Right, okay.
Because I was
making money, right?
Yeah, I was doing deals. I was one of the last people to do a deal out of our cohort of people that joined. But then once I learned how to piece the deal together, I've always been like that. I'm kind of like a process person. Once I find my own process, and I just rinse and repeat.
Got it.
So that was the grounding of sales, and then it kind of progressed. So as time went on, they grew the company, and there was a lot more people coming in to do the same job.
Yeah.
And they said to us, look, we need to get some people to be like a team leader.
Right.
So I was young still at the time, and they was like, you can have your own team and you get an extra bonus if they do deals. And
got it.
I was helping those people with their pitch and stuff like that. Still very, very young. And then eventually I left there.
Okay.
I just, I think as I was getting older, 2 or 3 years, I must have been 18 when I joined there.
Right.
When I got to about 20, I think I realised that I don't want to be calling these people every day, telling them they need insurance that they may or may not need.
I was going to say, was there a part of you that's like, this is a bit of a scam?
Do you know what? It wasn't a scam because they did get boiler insurance.
Yeah.
So if they took out cover with the company, they were insured.
Yeah.
But what I noticed as the years were progressing there, the quality of the people they were asking us to call, to be completely honest, was just getting older and older.
Right.
And it just didn't feel right. My parents had me quite late. Yeah. Very late. So my parents are always been the equivalent of people my age is like grandparents' age.
Right.
And it just once that started happening,
didn't feel good.
One day it was about 3 p.m. I think, and I was just smashing the phones like we do all day, and my friend always recalls it to this day. He says, I just put the phone down and I looked at him and I just said, I'm off now.
Yeah.
And I got up and just went and handed him my form and I said, look, I'm leaving. I didn't have a job or anything.
But you knew
I just walked out. Yeah, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And then that was when I started to look for a job in recruitment.
Right. Did you know somebody in recruitment?
Story is, so I was always trying to earn money. Right.
Hustler.
And yeah. Like at school, I was like buying and selling stuff. I was one of those kids, right?
Yeah.
I was in a bank one day, in a Santander, trying to open up a business bank account because I thought I was going to start a clothing company, right? I think a lot of kids have been there, right?
Yeah.
And I overheard a lady talking to her friend about her husband. And she was like, oh, he earns like 100 grand a year. And to me, that was like completely alien. Like my dad worked on building sites and construction all year round, definitely wasn't earning 100 grand. So back then I was like, what?
Yeah.
What's recruitment? And then I started looking into it. And that's why I always say people say they fell into it. Like I purposely got myself into recruitment, but the actual story is I, like many of us, applied for some jobs that I saw online, recruitment.
Yeah.
Thought I was going to interview at the recruitment company, but it was a rec to rec. So I didn't understand like why I wasn't going to meet the company.
Yeah.
And they were just sending me out around to all these different different companies, and that's happened to a lot of people.
It's crazy.
And then I went through vigorous interviews, 2014 that was, with S3. And then in the end, I actually joined the company in Bromley, in my local area, just because timing, they put an offer out to me.
Yeah.
And I accepted it. And then that was my first entry to recruitment.
So you're in recruitment, you're like, right, and did you take to it straight away? You know what I mean? Were you like, this is it? Or was it like, what the hell's going on?
I knew that once I arrived at the company, I felt like I was in the right place.
Right.
To this day, I've always said this, like the first company that I worked for, the people that I worked with there, we're all still in touch to this day.
Right, okay.
We've got our own little WhatsApp group and we meet up like once a year.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, a lot of the guys have gone their separate way. Many of them have left the industry now. Yeah. But I knew when I arrived at that company that I was in a good place. There was some, you know, I didn't have anything to compare it to, but looking back, there was some top billers there.
There was a business in Bromley called, was it MSB?
MSB. So they come, my old directors, if I'm not mistaken, they come from MSB.
Right.
I went and set up, and I think a lot of companies did that.
So that was because I don't know anyone from that business, but what I was told is it was wild, proper hardcore.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like serious, like proper sales, but successful. People did well. People made money. And I think for me, the experience that I have is so many people build a recruitment company because they want to be chilled out. They want to be no KPIs, like nonsense, right? Mm-hmm. The companies that do well are the companies that have a clear, unapologetic sales culture.
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
100%. I think that I've seen loads of this online, especially during the COVID time.
Yeah.
When people were hiring, like everybody was just hiring, and I kept seeing all these posts, or, you know, like rec to rec agencies posting, you know, no KPIs, grown up environment. And ultimately, I just think if you're not measuring your ratios, you can't improve them.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's to beat people around the head with a stick, with a KPI.
Yeah.
If the KPIs don't make sense, but if you reverse engineer the goal, and you know exactly what you need to do to generate projects. Yeah. We call them projects because we're predominantly delivering contract solutions to projects, but equally that the same could be true if you're a permanent recruitment business, generate jobs, if you want to call them that, or briefs or executive search. And you reverse engineer that, then why would you not measure it, and why would you not have non-negotiables? Why would you not, because the alternative is otherwise you turn up to work every single day and you just see how you get on. Yeah. And I think that, you know, as somebody that's worked in sales for a long time, I back myself as being good at business development. That's one thing I'll say confidently. I'm a new business guy. Yeah, yeah. And if I find that there's challenges now, then the average person who's turning up into an environment where they're saying, I'll just see how you get on today, I personally don't think they're ever going to succeed. No,
I couldn't agree more. So you started out in Bromley, you're in recruitment. Have you always done contract recruitment?
Yeah.
Always done contracts, always a hunter mentality, right? You're always looking for the next opportunity.
Yeah, correct.
Got it.
So I started doing SAP, SAP ERP. Didn't really know what SAP was on my interview. Like I remember it was one of my questions. I had to revise what SAP was and mention it in the interview. But when I started, I wasn't like given a niche. Yeah. I never started resourcing. They gave me like 1 or 2 jobs, but I come in straight away 360. So I wasn't like a delivery consultant 180 flipping to 360. So first things first, you know, I'm just listening, soaking everything up, asking the people that are doing well there what they're doing, how are they doing it. And then it was just contract SAP into Europe. That was my first stint.
Yeah. Big margin, big weekly GPs and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was, again, similar to the boiler insurance, I think I was the last one to do a deal of my intake.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm quite competitive. I remember being like frustrated because there was a girl that joined when I joined. She had no sales experience. I had, by that time, 2 or 3 years sales experience under my belt. So I kind of walked in thinking,
oh yeah, I'll show these guys.
These new people have never been on the phones before.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be the first one ringing the bell.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case.
Right.
So it took me a while to do my first deal, to be honest.
So, but obviously it went well because, and we'll move on to the second beginning. Let's talk about when did you decide, did you always see yourself as a business owner one day? Was that part of your vision for yourself and your future? Or, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, yes, I did. So
did?
My mum, I don't remember, but my mum says that when I was a young kid, I always used to like come out with like crazy things.
Right.
So like I'd be, really, really young and saying like, I'm going to have my own business one day. Or,
right.
I'm going to be successful. I don't really know where that come from. The work ethic comes from my dad. But I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing at some stage in life.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to the school thing. I didn't always do so well with like authority. I always liked to do things my own way. I was always respectful.
Yeah.
But I like to do things my own way.
If I was to ask your first manager for, what's Chris Moylan like? As what would they say?
So I'm told it's very, very positive.
Yeah. You're not a troublemaker?
No. Certainly. And when I was in younger years, never in work.
Never
so
in
like
work.
when I'm at work.
So that kind of, that fear, that authority thing didn't follow you into your career then, which is good.
No, because I think I was always grateful for my opportunity.
Yeah.
I was always, like I say, because I come from, like previous to recruitment and previous to sales, I was working on building sites earning like £100 a week.
Yeah.
Doing like 8, 9, 10 hour days through like an apprenticeship scheme.
Got it.
So for me, when I got just a basic salary, I was super grateful. To actually receive training and,
right, okay.
So I would never ever undermine I didn't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
So I just kind of done as I was told.
Can you remember the day or the moment that you were like, I'm going to start something on my own?
Yeah, so I had ideas. I think, like most people, right? Sometimes you're a bit naive. So I was slow to do a deal. Like I say, I'd done my first deal, built up a contract book. Certainly in those days, I wasn't thinking about setting up my business because I had a bit of a bumpy start. So I build big numbers there, but I had challenges where like I'd have 6-month contracts. So like my book would go up and then it would come back down and then it would go up and come back down. For me, when I knew categorically that I wanted to set up my own business was after I left that business.
Right.
And when I was in the second stint. But I enjoyed technology recruitment there for a good while without really having a desire to set up my own business.
Right, okay. So, tell us about the formation of your first company then. That's what our listeners want to hear about. can you tell us what if you had advice to give to somebody in your shoe, a younger you, tell us about that journey.
I think it really depends on your market and, understanding your market. So the story was I left that organisation where I was doing contract SAP after, I think, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I got some promotions there. I done well. And I just reached a point where I felt like there was more for me somewhere else. I wasn't particularly agreeing with the way that certain things were done, and that's not to talk negatively about anybody. There's some great guys, and if I bump into any of my old employers now, we say hello, we have a catch up. But I just felt like there was a misalignment, so I left. I put in my resignation. They asked me to stay, and then because, again, going back to the engineering and the construction and like the Irish, having the plumbing, and somebody said to me, you should give construction recruitment a go. Which is crazy because everyone that I speak to that's done tech never really goes tech into engineering and construction. They normally come out and go into tech. So I did the opposite. I found a company uptown and I started working there, doing engineering and construction completely cold. Again, so like previously was cold.
And when you saying was it blue collar or white collar?
Initially, it was all blue collar.
Blue collar, so building site stuff.
Yeah, all building sites. And I think that was completely cold. So at the time, the company had no database for what I was doing. But again, I didn't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
And they didn't give me a niche. So I didn't walk in and say, you're doing, I don't know, data center technicians, or you're doing heating engineers, or you're doing electrical. They just said, well, do what you want. Like I interviewed well.
Yeah.
They trusted me. I had proof of billings at my old company.
Yeah.
They really liked me. And then I just said, right, well, I'll go into like mechanical and electrical engineering, because I'd done that kind of work on site myself.
Yeah, so you could talk to those people with a degree,
I understood what these people were doing.
Yeah,
I was like, if I can understand what they're doing, I should be able to add value.
Yeah.
And that was where, whilst I built good numbers at the first place, that was where I really like skyrocketed and sort of changed my life. Yeah. And
so, what kind of numbers were you billing? In a, do you think of it as weekly GP, monthly GP, annual billings?
It's so in contract tech, you'll always look at your weekly GP. In the engineering and construction, it's very hard to, you just look at your timesheets once they come in, because everybody's on 0 hours contract.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the Wild West, right? A candidate can leave at any time, give you no notice, just pick up their tools and go.
Yeah.
And the same way a client can contact you on a Friday and say, right, you've got 40 engineers on this project, but I want 9 of them not to come back on Monday.
Right.
There's no notice whatsoever.
Got it.
So it works in your benefit and against you. So you can do 30 deals in a week if you want.
Yeah.
But some of them might only work for a week.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, at peak, I was doing 83k a month, 89k a month, 90k a month.
Serious numbers.
But that wasn't in my first year. I had to build up to that. I think year one, I think I'd done like 350k or something in my first year.
So you're earning good money at this point. You got a decent, probably your first taste of serious cash.
Yeah, correct.
And in a company that sounds like you're happy with, enjoying, in a market you seem to have an affinity with, right?
Yeah, it's like super fast paced. Yeah. I'm kind of like that. I'm like 100 miles an hour.
Right,
so
okay.
It worked well for me for the time that I was there.
Yeah. And then, that was the beginning, or not the beginning of the end, but your next step was into your own business, correct?
Yeah, correct. So I left that organisation. The story behind that is my mother got sick. So she got sick. I mean, she's still with us now, thank God.
Yeah.
But she got sick and she went onto like life support machine.
Right.
So I had to take some time off of work. And again, nothing but respect for my employers at the time. I learned a lot there. But there was this, as you hear from many people, there was an issue where there was a change made to the commission structure in my absence.
Right.
And I'm looking after my mum, or attending hospital, like she was on life support in a coma for a month. And I got my pay pack and it was very light, like hugely light.
Yeah.
And that it was at that point where I was like, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
And even though I went in and we rectified it, and they said, look, we're going to change the commission structure moving forward. Because I was like, you can't backdate it. I've already done those numbers. We haven't had a meeting.
Yeah.
It was at that point that I knew I was going to leave.
Yeah.
And the plan was I was supposed to go and set up my first business with my, at the time, friend.
Yeah.
So we had a discussion. We said, let's put our notices in.
Yeah.
And we'll set up a business together.
Got it.
But that didn't materialise.
Right, okay.
So I put my notice in.
Yeah.
He put his notice in.
Yeah.
I went on holiday with my my ex at the time.
Yeah.
Me and her went to Spain, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
To have a little recharge before we launched the business.
Yeah.
And when I come back, he'd gone and got another job somewhere else.
Oh no.
So I was earning like very, very good, very, very good money for my age.
Yeah.
And I'd given myself 12 months runway.
Yeah.
For this business based on us going halves. But then obviously he'd then got a job. So I only had 6 months to make it work.
Got it.
I had some discussions with my ex and she said, I think you can do it. And that was it. I set the business up on my own.
Right, okay.
Basically when I was 26.
And that might have been a blessing, though. I mean, a blessing in disguise.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Because I think, look, the sole founder's journey is a very different one to that of 2 co-founders, right? But if you can make it work, you're not split for a start. You're not splitting off the equity, right? You know, you own the whole company.
Yeah.
So you started the company. You're on your own.
Yeah.
Bricking it.
I think, if I remember rightly, there's never a good time to start a business, right? So I started the business and it was literally coffee, like dining room table in my house, laptop and a phone.
Yeah.
And I was just doing business, but it was around the time of like Brexit, because I think I founded the business in 2019. So I think Brexit had happened. I remember there was talks about, there's always talks about how the market will be impacted, but I just got out of the traps quick and early. I had a covenant, so, you know, like many people, restricted covenant. I didn't really want to disrespect that. You know, my old employers have been quite good to me. So, and it doesn't make sense, to be honest with you. So I just went straight new business, and I done very well, to be honest.
Did you stay in property, in construction and engineering?
That business, yeah. So that, my old business is a company which was called Westwork Engineering. And yeah, I stayed in construction and engineering, started off only doing the UK.
Right.
Up and down the UK, like we wasn't confined to London.
Got it.
Like we do like Scotland, Wales, Birmingham.
Okay.
And was just essentially placing engineers onto large scale commercial and like civil engineering construction projects.
Right. That's where you talked about you might get 30 engineers, 30 roles in one go type thing.
Yeah. So we would have like levels. So sometimes we might get like 2, electrical engineers who are on a day rate, and that'll be slower. But then other times, if they say, well, we need, 25 engineers, like just site-based engineers to do electrical and mechanical work. That could be, we've got a hospital on Monday, and then they might say, I've also got, a football stadium where we need engineers. Can you get 10 to go to here and 10 to go to there? And then we would have to go out and find the engineers. In that level of work, I think it's different because there's no interview. The client doesn't interview the engineer. We do, and you check all of their credentials, their qualifications, their skills card, and you send them to the project, you reference them, you send them to the project, and you just need them to turn up.
Right, okay.
Because it's 0 hours contract, if the client's unhappy with the contract, so they'll just say, look, it's time to go. And because of that, there's no interview. Which when I speak to people that have never done it, they're like, that's crazy. So you're essentially just sending people into projects. Okay.
And your job's to make sure they're as good as possibly you can be.
Yeah, correct. So like with the higher level stuff, like later on, we branch into like the data centers and stuff like that. There's interviews with that, you know. But with just the site-based stuff, we were just sending engineers into projects.
And you exited that company, right?
Correct.
Which highly unusual for a founder of your age to have an exit under his belt already. Yeah, correct. So tell us about that.
So, I'd love to sit there and say that, I had a huge exit and sold the company for 100 million. I'm living my days out. That's not entirely what happened, but I tried to scale the company a number of times. So we done very, very well. I think the company, first year we done 1 million invoiced. Year 2, I think it was slightly higher. We had COVID coming around those times. And that was crazy because we had 140 engineers out, 0 hours contract on the Monday. And by Friday, I had 3 left.
Jeez.
Because they were just like, it's COVID, everybody's got to go home. So my weekly book had just literally just obliterated before my eyes. And then luckily we got onto some of the COVID hospitals, like building the COVID hospitals. And that kind of kept the business alive, because as much as you're doing really, really well one minute, you might not be the next. And I repeated that cycle for, I think I had the company 26, turning 27, and I exited at 30, 31. So just a couple of years ago. And I got to the point where I had launched my now business. So I had two agencies. And I was looking at the success we were having on the tech, and the ultimate reason, like we were a great business, we had great logos, we delivered a great service. The number one reason that I exited that market was we just continuously wasn't getting paid.
Really?
Yeah.
Just what? Clients just not
companies
paying?
Just going insolvent, companies liquidating. Like in the UK, it's a very, very big problem, not just for agencies, but for subcontractors, for like anybody, I take my hat off, anybody that works in that market, be it the owner of a building company or an agency that are working in high-end commercial and like civil engineering projects, it's cash flow, because the standard in the UK is everybody's paid weekly.
Right. Okay.
Doesn't matter what you think or for your cash flow. The lads are paid weekly, or they're not going to work. Yeah. So, and in many cases, your 45, 60 days end of month payment terms of clients. They're paying late.
And then they don't pay.
And then sometimes they don't. So sometimes you've hemorrhaged 130, 150 grand on one client.
Jesus.
And they go pop. And of course you have insurances and stuff.
Yeah.
But I rode that train from 26 until I was 30.
It must be stressful.
Yeah, very stressful. Because I think as the sole business owner, you've got no one to really complain about it to.
Yeah.
You can't really go and complain to the missus about it all the time. She doesn't really get it, right? No one's asked you to launch a business.
Yeah, exactly.
So I used to wake up and, go and check the ledger. So I might wake up at 4 a.m. and say, I'm just going to go and check the ledger and see
how much money's in.
See where we're at. And I think it was the last year, we used to factor in about 100 grand a year for losses.
Yeah.
We knew that we would get unpaid invoices of up to about 100 grand a year. And then in the later years, I think we had one year it was 200. In the last year it was 280.
Jesus.
And I said, we was having success on the other business.
Yeah.
And I thought, rather than just keep chasing my tail with this, why don't I just take my revenue out of this business?
Yeah.
And just go all in on the tech.
Right.
And I did. And then somebody actually made an offer for the business to do something else with it.
Right. Okay. Because I guess it's got trading history. It's got.
Yeah. So they had lots of accounts.
They can use that as a vehicle to do something with.
Exactly. So it made no sense for me to not do that. So I done that. And that's when I went all in onto the current business.
Yeah. But then tragedy struck, right? So it wasn't always, it's not been plain sailing for your second business.
No.
So tell us about that.
So the story is I went to go all in on the second business because I used to split my time between the two. Pivoted some staff over from my older business to the new. Yeah. Like the guys that I'd trained up and I thought would do well in tech. I had some difficult discussions to let some other people go. Mentioned to them that we was exiting that market. Yeah. And then I went all in on the tech recruitment business. And that was around about April last year. Yeah. When I decided, right, I'm going to fully commit. Up until that time, I'd just been training somebody and developing somebody that worked in that business for me. So I was off the tools. Yeah. Training somebody else to do recruitment in that business. Yeah. And he's still with me now. Dylan, he's a great lad. But then I was about 2 or 3 months in, and then my brother basically had an accident. He was 42, he's 10 years older than me, and he passed away in August last year.
What happened?
Which was so the truth is with that, he was on like prescription drugs from, he had some health challenges. Yeah. And I think he just overdone it with the prescription drugs. He just went to sleep one day and he didn't wake back up.
Nightmare.
At my mother's home. And so that was tough, Yeah. Naturally I had to take time off of work to go and support, my mother, my father, all of the stuff that you would imagine.
Of course.
And then still coming into the office like every few days to check in on everybody, make sure everything.
Trying to G up the team, put on a brave face, all that.
Yeah, exactly. But balancing it all. My father's health had kind of deteriorated at that point. Yeah. And my father was always like the head of the family type of thing. Like he's kind of the guy that you go to when something happens. But in that instance, I knew that I couldn't really do that. He just lost his son, like his firstborn son. And my brother. So I managed that as best I could, with my sister. I've got a sister as well. And then as crazy as it is, just kind of got back to work.
Right, okay.
Just, once the dust settled, and I mean, naturally it's still very raw now. Yeah. You have, I've always been one of those people. I think that my way of dealing with a lot of things is just go to the work or go to the gym.
Well, you often just don't know anything. There's nothing else to do. What else are you going to do?
You expect life to stop and stand still, but it doesn't, right? And you've got lots and lots of things to do. And the way that my brother was, he'd want me to be cracking on and cracking on. So I pushed on with that, but then I think the shock of all of that, without going too deep, but my father then passed away 8 weeks later.
Crazy.
So my brother passed in the August, and then 8 weeks later, my father passed.
So you're in the middle of launching a new company, and your brother, then your father died in the space of 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Mad.
Which is, it sounds crazy. Like anybody that I know is like, what the hell? And I used to hear of like things happening to people, and I used to think, oh wow, it's intense.
Yeah.
You just don't really expect things like that to happen.
Of course.
To be honest, you don't, right? So that happened. We said our goodbyes to my father. Had his service back end of the year.
Yeah.
And then December's a quieter period.
Yeah.
Come back in January. Naturally, my mother, obviously she's lost her son and her husband. She had a health flare and went into hospital in February, and was very sick. So look, there's been a lot of that stuff out that you won't see on on LinkedIn, or you don't see behind the scenes. That has prevented me from just solely working.
Yeah, exactly.
But now is the time when we're sort of all in now.
Yeah,
we're all in on the business. It's essentially. Yeah, I'm back on the tools now.
Yeah. Do you still love it, being on the tools?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
You've never drifted away into like a management type role. You've always been on the front foot.
I mean, in the last sort of 6 months, a lot of what I've been doing is management, just training and developing, or looking to improve the business processes, or training and coaching, recruitment consultants that have worked for us, some that have gone on to elsewhere, or some that haven't lasted, and some that have. But now is the time when I've said I'm gonna step back, build my own book from scratch in a brand new market, and just sort of go again.
Yeah. Because I mentioned at the top of the episode about the suit, right? And I was kind of half joking, but I really think it's interesting when I meet people on this show who have either gone back to wearing a suit and a tie every day because they think that it's an important component of the culture, which is showing up to work looking like the best version of yourself. And then the same thing is about a growing trend of returning to the office 5 days a week. Tell me about your thoughts on those two things.
I think, look, we've all seen the endless debate on LinkedIn, right? Should you work from home or should you not? My opinion is that you should seek out a company that allows you to work how you best work.
Right.
I don't think that it makes sense to have an endless debate about what companies should do, because companies are run by people, and people are all different, right? So that means companies are all different. Nobody's ever going to all conform to one standard of hybrid or whatever. For us, we've always worn a suit.
Yeah.
And we've always been in the office.
5 days?
5 days, yeah. So, I've heard people laugh or say, oh, you still wear a suit or whatever, but we never stopped. We do a dress down on a Friday because the guys might want to go off and do their thing and, go to the pub or go to an event and don't want to be in a full suit.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't know any different. That's just how I've always gone to work. I've always...
But did you not get sucked into the debate, as the world around you is changing, how do you resist that? Because it's trendy, isn't it? Oh, everyone's wearing T-shirts and shorts or whatever. So you start to feel that inward pressure. Somebody resigns. Why are you resigning? Oh, well, this place is old-fashioned. They don't, whatever. That's the kind of chat you get generally from shit people, right? Who aren't very good at the job. And then what they do is they complain and moan about, oh, it's this, it's that, it's the other, right? Standard. Everyone goes through it. How have you resisted that when others haven't? I didn't. Yeah, I let the tail wag the dog far too many times in my recruitment company, to huge level of regret, where too many times you get these moaners complaining about something, and what you end up doing is diluting things to satisfy the lowest common denominator. And I think if I had my time again, that would be something I would never do again.
Yeah, I think ultimately your business needs to be somewhere that you want to work. And as you grow, you will change. Like the things that get you to where you are might not get you to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And you will ease up on some things. So like I used to be, probably too much. I'm still 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And we've got non-negotiables in our company that everybody has to stick to and respect.
And what are they?
Coming in on time.
Right.
If you come in on time, you're late. I know that's super old fashioned, but that's just how it is. You know, there's no reason to keep coming into work late all the time. You know, I've always said to people, like, you don't have a train problem, you have an alarm clock problem. Like if your train, granted the trains in the UK are very bad. Right, but if you know that, and it happens once and it happens again and it happens again, and the chances are you need to get up earlier. Go to bed earlier. But, you know, that being respectful to each other, you know, we have a laugh and a joke, but don't make each other feel uncomfortable. There's certain things that we just encourage people not to talk about in the office, talk about in your spare time. And then people aren't obligated to wear a tie to work. Wear a suit, shirt, you know, girls dress, you know, smart, office attire, Monday to Thursday, and then we dress down on a Friday. But for us, what we find is when we go out, I mean, we're much smaller now, there's less of us, but when I had the two businesses, when we would all go out together, people would say, what do you guys do? Some people want to come and work for us just because you know, we look the part. We're out, we're doing things, we're going to nice venues, you know, we're celebrating milestones or sales achievements. And for me, it probably goes back to the first sales job. It was non-negotiable. And then even in the first recruitment job, it was non-negotiable. So it was just drilled in from day one. Like you wear a suit, you know, look the part, be the part, act the part, all of that type of stuff. And that's just kind of stuck with me, and I've carried that through. But interestingly, like I've got a business partner, we've got different offices, and it's only my office that still carries that. So some of the other offices, we've got, you know, another office in Bedfordshire, Luton. He has another business which is called ASAP Staffing. You know, they're great guys. They don't wear suits in the office. They're good guys. We've got an office in Morocco, in Marrakesh. They don't wear suits in the office. And then we've got a small office in Dubai and Business Bay, and they do smart. Like they'll wear like chinos and a shirt or chinos and a polo. But our office has just always been.
I love that though.
Always been that.
Are you quite hard-headed? Like, are you? What's the word I'm looking for? Are you stubborn?
Stubborn. Yeah, I would say I'm stubborn with things where, look, I'm somebody who likes a path of least resistance, right? If there's a way to do something better, quicker, more efficiently, and it works, believe me, I've tried it. So when I say something to somebody and I say, look, you know, this is the way to do this, sometimes people have to learn from their own mistakes, but I won't typically change my ways. You know, I am how I am. I think if I was going to change, I would have changed by now. I am how I am, but for a long time, people used to question me about things, you know, oh, you work too much, or, you know, why do you still wear a suit, or why are you guys in the office 5 days a week? And I used to sit and reflect sometimes. I think, oh, maybe I am too much. But then after a while, I'm at a space in my life now where I'm happy with who I am, I'm happy with where I'm at, I'm happy with the business that we're building. And I think the people that resonate with that will attract. And the people that it doesn't,
that's fine.
It will repel. And that's absolutely fine. There's loads of other places for those people to go and work.
What's been the hardest thing, apart from the obvious tragedy, but in a business sense? Do you have any lesson? I'm sure you've loads of lessons learned, but have you got anything that jumps out to you as where you've really had to, you know, had any real setbacks?
For business, I think the key thing is if you're going to launch a business, particularly doing contract, you need to understand the difference between profit and cash flow, deals and cash flow. If you're doing permanent, it's slightly different, because ultimately, when you're doing contracts, you're payrolling the contractors. You know, you need to make sure you've got funds to pay those contractors. And the funds that you think you need, I can tell you probably need 2.5 times that. Because companies will pay late. Companies will ask for more contractors, which means, you know, you had a pot of cash and now you need to start another 8 contractors. You know, that's great news, right? You've got business, but you need to be able to fund that. And you can do things like factor, you can speak to banks, but early on those companies don't want to speak to you. They don't want to take the risk. So you need cash, you know, revenue. And to understand the difference between cash flow and profit, what I mean by that is just because you've got loads of contractors out, you can say, right, I'm gonna hire now. I'm going to hire 3 people. I'm going to do a training academy, and I'm going to bring people in and I'm going to teach them how to do recruitment. But just because you've got contractors, that doesn't mean you're being paid. there's not, you know, it doesn't correlate. So you need to actually budget and forecast. And I was guilty of that. When I launched the business, I was 26, right? I'd only ever build big numbers. I hadn't run a business. You know, some people, they work for big corporates, you know, your Hazes, your Randstads, they learn P&L, budgeting on somebody else's money.
Yeah.
I had to learn that on my own.
Got it.
And I think that was a big stumbling block. It's like, especially if you're in a market where it's 0 hours contract, like you might have 100 contractors that hire 4 people, but in 2 weeks, if you've only got 52 out and you're not being paid, you've still got to pay for everybody and your overheads. The other thing I would say is the time that it takes to get trainees off the ground is typically longer than you think. The industry says 3 months, right?
Yeah.
3 months. Everybody screams about 3 months. In my experience, it takes a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
So I would just say those are the main things. Like, know what you're going to do, stick to it. If you're doing contract, make sure you've got the cash to do it. And the other thing, what I think is more important later in the journey, and I was guilty of this, is you need to not be worrying about what everybody else is doing with their business.
Yeah.
Like, LinkedIn's a great tool. It's great for branding. But you don't need to believe everything you see on LinkedIn. You know, they say comparison's a thief of joy. Like, I was guilty of it when I started my business. We were doing really, really well, and I'd be looking at other businesses saying, "Oh, those guys, they've hired lots of people." But you know, just because people are hiring people doesn't mean they're profitable.
Yeah. And we've seen that in the last 12 months. Companies that on the surface looked like they were flying, gone.
Big companies, 70, 80 headcount.
Dead.
That have folded up. And, you know, look, I take my hat off to anybody, because it must be a real challenging experience to put your life and effort into something, grow it to that size, and then see it, you know, go bust.
Yeah.
The other thing is, on the flip side of that, you can look at companies online, and, you know, some people can look at accounts. Like, if you looked at my old accounts, my old business, it wouldn't say we were doing 6 million. It wouldn't, because it was all factored. The factoring company largely owned the turnover, the way that we run it for risk and insurance. So it works both ways. You can look at a company you think they're doing really, really well, and they're not. And you can look at another company who've got 3 heads, and, you know, their accounts might not be showing huge profits, but they might be factoring and you know, not own the turnover and be flying. But the key takeaway is just focus on yourself and what's working, and ask yourself, is what you've always done to generate business, is it still working? Because if it isn't, you might need to change it.
And you've been working on your personal brand,
yeah,
which I think is, well, as you would expect, something that I strongly advocate. Tell me about, you know, I think what would be a nice thing to finish on is, why have you embarked on that kind of journey, and what have you learned along the way?
I think it's still fairly new for me, right? So I'm really, really old school, private type of person. As much as I'm loud, I'm character, I'm in your face in the office, 100 miles an hour, don't really post much. You know, and we've been told time and time again, like, we'll go on incentives. You know, we went on a big incentive to Lisbon, had a great villa there for the team and stuff, across the 2 brands. Didn't really take any photos, didn't post it.
Right.
And I think we got to a point where we realised, do you know what? There's loads of companies that like what we have to say. We have loads of conversations with clients, and they say, "Oh, it's really different working with you guys. You know, it's refreshing." Or you know, contractors in our market. And we realised we don't post ourselves. We don't post much. You know, we might do a shout out, or if we've hit a milestone. But it was last year when I decided, right, I'm going to start branding. You know, and just speaking to people, really. And even a lot of the things that have come from that, like even you and I speaking, that's through branding on LinkedIn. You know, doing outreach, or, you know, commenting on different people's posts, or, you know, just seeing what's going on in the market. I started working with Amelia Sordell, the guys at Clout. They've helped and encouraged branding, and I think ultimately it's a bit uncomfortable at first, right? You don't want to just be putting yourself out there, but ultimately you've got a unique story to tell. And some people won't like it, and some people will. And I think you just have to, you know, you just have to turn up every day and make sure you're posting stuff that is actually relevant to your target audience. That's my experience with it so far. I'm only at the beginning of my journey, so I'm not somebody who's got some huge following on LinkedIn, you know. But I'm just at the early stages of the journey, really.
Mate, I think that's an amazing way to end. And I'm sure that when we meet again, your follow account will have gone through the roof if your success is anything like the success you've had with everything else that you've done.
Yeah. And that's great. Well, thanks for having me on, Andy. I appreciate it.
Chris, it's been a real pleasure, mate. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks
Cheers, mate.